All right, what's going on, guys? Good morning. Okay, Dakar hangover is kind of starting to taper off. We've still got a lot going on. Post-race interviews, things like that. I've already spoken with Willem Avenant. We're going to loosely start working towards getting him on the show and talking a little bit about the Dakar and how his race went. But before we get to that, we've got a few other interviews to get through, and including this one. And this one is Kira speaking with none other than Phil Henderson at South Racing. He is the communications manager there, and talking a little bit about strategy, talking a little bit about vehicle development, talking a little bit about drivers and what they look for. And so there's some really, really good stuff here in this interview, talking with them, both of them talking a little bit about, just basically how things roll there. And it is very awesome to see how the development of the Maverick R, developed by BRP, has really just changed and revolutionized. It's been a competition between them and Polaris Razor, the Polaris Razor, and so it is really awesome to see. So a little bit of a departure. We normally talk about motorcycles here on the show, but we definitely want to start bringing in some of this UTV content because, well, rally racing has many different categories, and well, obviously the vehicles is one of them. And if you're looking to get into it, one of the fastest ways to get into this is a vehicle. We're used to driving a vehicle. We're kind of familiar with that. It's not as difficult. Now you got to learn how to retrain and do some of that stuff. But it's not like learning to ride a motorcycle. So riding a motorcycle, obviously a little bit more complicated, especially when you have to go at a certain speed to be able to finish these stages. And it absolutely, and you'll hear Phil Henderson mention it, is that this is a very... with motorcycles, it takes a lot. It is extremely demanding to be able to ride and navigate at the same time. In the case of Andrew Short, who is co-rider or navigator this time around in one of the vehicles, and then as well as this with Hunter Miller. And then you've got Sarah Price as well, Sean Berryman on the Can-Am team as well. So there's a lot going on in the world of UTVs, and it is only going to continue to grow. Outside, in the U.S., it's not been as popular in rally, but that doesn't mean it can change, especially the more we start to see these vehicles complete Dakars. You'll hear Phil Henderson talk a little bit about what it takes to get one of these things to rally. So with that being said, let's get right to the interview. I hope you guys enjoy, and don't forget, if you like the conversation, hit subscribe, hit that like button. We'll know that way we're headed in the right direction. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Here's the interview.
All right. Thank you for joining the Chasing Waypoints podcast. I really appreciate that. Please, can you introduce yourself to our rally audience?
Sure. I'm Phil Henderson, and I'm the communications manager for South Racing.
And so how long have you been working with South Racing?
I've been working with South Racing for the past 7 years now. So at first, I was part of the Can-Am team at BRP, running the Dakar program for them over there. And then the appetite grew to kind of keep going with the rally side of things. And I joined the team to run the communication on the bigger races, so the W2RC circuit, as well as the Dakar Rally.
So you're very well versed at Dakar. How many Dakars have you been to now?
So this will be my 6th Dakar. I've been involved, obviously, for 7 of them. One of them was a wash because of COVID, so I wasn't able to attend that one. But yeah, so I'm excited to be here again in Saudi Arabia.
Have you done, obviously, since you've done 6, you've done some in Latin America and some in Saudi.
Yeah.
What do you think are the real differences about these two places?
I think, I've seen the sport evolve quite a bit. So I think the big difference between the South America Dakars and the Saudi ones, I think it's the sheer scale of things. Side by side sport has opened up a whole new audience to this event. I feel that year over year in Saudi, I've seen the competition grow in the side by side categories, so T3 and T4. But my heart has always been with South America. I think the fans were very passionate and got a little bit more involved over there. And it really felt different when you drove around, or if you had conversations with people, you weren't able to walk down the street without getting applauded or people wanting stickers or stuff like that. So I feel that the fans, I would say, make South America really great. Obviously, don't get me wrong, the terrain is less challenging, but in Saudi Arabia, what's been fun is to see the growth of the sport and to see how many more people get involved these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say for people who know nothing about Saudi Arabia, I probably will never go here? How do you feel about the people, since we're talking about them and your experiences so far?
So I was able to participate in the first edition of the rally here in Saudi, and I've seen a great evolution from the culture here. At first, it hasn't been that long since the culture opened up to the Western world, and I feel that year over year, we're getting a little bit more appreciated to be here. Now we're seeing fans, we're seeing kids out in the dunes, cheering competitors on. And I believe the footprint of the race is really being felt now in the Saudi country. But if you rewind like 4 years ago, it wasn't the same. It was a little bit more shut off, a little bit more bubbled, and we didn't really feel like the people of the country knew that there was this massive event going on in their backyard, because the Kingdom of Saudi is so vast that it's impossible to inform everybody that there's this international event happening, So I would say that, the evolution of the culture is probably the most impactful thing that we've seen over time here in Saudi.
And so, to me, Saudi and South America couldn't be more different, especially in the terrain. Definitely there's similarities, but what do you think about the differences in the, all that variety, forest, jungle, desert, dunes in South America, and what is essentially seems like just several variations of desert in Saudi? How does that help the field and the racers, or is it a disadvantage?
I mean, it depends on your style of driving, right? Everybody has a different style of driving or terrain that they exceed at or that they're better at. I feel that, you have people coming from the US now that have grown into like desert racing, which is a bit of a tight course. You follow some ruts all day and, it's usually a 1-day event and you go home at the end of the day. And, you mix that up with, more of like Baja style or like more European Baja style and Europe racers where they're used to rally racing over a long period of time and stuff like that. So they're a bit more used to the style of racing and the terrain and everything like that. But if you really want to compare the terrains, I would say there's equal challenges on either spectrum or either side of the world, Yes, Saudi tends to be a little bit more variations of desert, like you say. But at the same time, that also comes with its sets of challenges, like really tall dunes that we don't get to practice in America. Different types of challenging terrain, like rocky sections for days. And so you compare it to like King of the Hammers, where the rock section is kind of bundled into obstacles. And then there's a fast paced desert section. Well, imagine that, but like times a million here in Saudi, So, I don't feel like it's comparable in scale. But definitely, there's something for everybody on either side of the world.
And do you think the Maverick R, this is its premiere year at Dakar. How do you think it's suited for this type of environment?
So the Maverick R is the third iteration of the Maverick platform. So if you scale back history a little bit, BRP developed the Maverick platform, or the Gen 1 platform, in order to be a recreational side-by-side vehicle with a little bit more performance in mind. And at that time, racers started to get a little bit more intrigued with the performance and the speed that platform offered. Fast forward a few years after that, with the BRP introduced the Maverick X3 platform in 2016, and that was a game changer industry-wide. It came with a lot of trophy truck-inspired components, trailing arms, huge suspension. And in the side-by-side world, nobody was doing that at the time. So that vehicle propelled, rally racing in a way because it became a lot more accessible for people. And when I say accessible, I mean, if you look at different categories at Dakar, trucks or T1 programs and stuff like that, those are usually manufactured supported programs that run, multiple $1 million a year. And from, the average consumer is not necessarily obtainable, Side-by-sides, on the other hand, are a little bit more accessible when it comes to price tags. And opens up a lot more, I would say, audience or appetite for this type of racing, So the X3 was a catalyst into that world. And then fast forward a few years after that, VRP never stopped developing. And they took everything that they learned from racing, from consumers, and, started going to work on the Maverick R platform, and I remember the development phase being, a 5-year plan where from sketching, ideation, all the way to engineering and manufacturing, that's a 5-year process, so a lot of testing gets involved in that, a lot of engineer work, a lot of components being developed and everything. So the Maverick R right now is the culmination of all the knowledge that has been acquired over the years based on racing, based on consumer-facing feedback and stuff like that. And now we're seeing a proper race car come off the showroom floor.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you said, the X3 really pioneered the racing effort for Can-Am, and I feel like, it's the tried and true machine that especially everyone in the Southwest North America chooses for racing road. And the question, I guess, is why would someone want to move on to the Mav R? Who's the one buying the Mav R when they know that the X3 can perform?
I would say if you ask the racer, the main answer would be the sequential transmission. Okay, so obviously there was a new power pack developed for the Maverick R, so it comes with a 3-cylinder 999cc turbo engine. So you got power for days in there. The suspension components have been really beefed up. You got the top knuckle suspension in the front that gives you a lot more give, or a lot more, I would say not leeway, but a lot more forgiveness, right, in bumpy terrain. And the heart of it all is the sequential gearbox. So you got a 7-speed sequential gearbox in there, which allows pilots to be able to be a little bit more nimble on the throttle, right? Choose when the shifts happen, as opposed to an X3 where they were belt driven, so a CVT platform where you're kind of limited to your style of driving and the capability of the pulley. So I would say that's what opens up the possibilities from a racing perspective, and it becomes a proper race car. You look at different categories, like T1 cars, for example, they're all sequential transmissions. It's all rally style, So I would say aspirating drivers that want to get into the sport and definitely climb the ranks of the sport, I think this is a phenomenal place to start, just to have that driving ability, that driving sensation of being in a rally car, that will allow you to graduate upwards when the time is right, and we've seen it done. And we've, South Racing has been a big part in propulsing people into that direction. Now we're seeing, kids like Seth Quintero, now driving a T1 truck, but, a few years ago he was driving an X3, so that's a great learning platform.
Yeah, actually, I definitely can see that point. And I mean, to me, someone who enjoys driving casually, I love the sequential gearbox. It's fun. It makes it feel more visceral. You're part of it a little bit more. But I will ask that elephant in the room: is the knuckle really necessary? You might have already answered it, but maybe let's make it a little more succinct.
Yeah. So the knuckle suspension, obviously, when it was released, it caused a lot of I would say consumer feedback online. Some of it being positive, a lot of it being negative, based on aesthetics. Right.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that the engineers at BRP don't manufacture these vehicles necessarily with only aesthetics in mind. There's also functionality, right? And there was a lot of debate between the engineering team and the design team to either have the knuckle on top or the knuckle facing inwards. And ultimately, the decision was taken based off performance, based off data, to have the top knuckle be over the tire.
Do you think competitors will maybe jump on board that kind of external design style in the future? Or, I mean, they're really doing...
Yes. So the reason why people talk about it is because it's exposed, right? So the hood of the vehicle is cut out to leave more room for suspension travel. But a lot of vehicles out here have the top knuckle design. It's just hidden under a wheel well. So the trucks have it, cars have it. It's not necessarily something that's it's not prototype design or anything like that. Right? Exactly. It's not brand new technology. It's just a proven technology that works. So that's why they migrated it to the side-by-side world.
Interesting. And so you've seen it performing well in the desert racing side, guys like Hunter Miller, who, this is his first year at Dakar. And a lot of people don't know that he's obviously been helping to develop the Mav R for years. and he's also been a big fan of Dakar, and this has been one of his biggest aspirations. Do you think someone like that who has intimate knowledge of this vehicle and this platform could be more successful at a race like this than someone who's just kind of jumping in and doesn't really understand it?
Yeah, great question. Hunter and I have been friends for the past decade. We've done projects together at BRP, and I would say that when Dakar came around every year, he was probably the number one person texting me every day, waking up early to see the race updates, and was really into figuring out the data behind the race as well, not just the race aspect. He would talk about splits and times and what happened here, and watching the GPS tracker and all that. And Hunter and I have been involved in conversations about getting him here for quite some time now. I think for him, being a well-decorated racer in the U.S., having won King of the Hammers, having won the GNCC championship and stuff like that, I think the natural progression as a racer is you want to go to the big step. You want to go to the most prestigious, most difficult race in the world, and as a competitor, I think you can respect and appreciate that, and Hunter is definitely one of those guys that has the appetite for racing, everything racing, and I love the fact that he's here now, and I'm happy for him. Even if he had, kind of a bad day on day one, but that's part of racing. And this is a multiple-year program for him. And this year might be a learning year. He's out there competing right now, and who knows where he's going to land at the end of the rally. So super stoked for him.
Hunter might have had a rough start, but this is Dakar. Anything can happen by the end, and it's also about the overall racing program. And maybe this year, it's going to be more about him learning.
Absolutely.
And, Hunter Miller's here, and that's a big exciting thing for a lot of us in the U.S. to see, but also that he has brought Andrew Short back into the mix, and who obviously he's retired from rally on motorcycles a couple of years ago. And now, he was co-driver for someone last year, and now he gets to be co-driver for Hunter. How did Hunter choose Andrew as the navigator?
So Shorty and Hunter have been friends for some time now. They're two Texas boys, right? And I think there's a certain mutual respect there just coming from that state in the U.S. Andrew, like you mentioned, is a well-decorated rally driver and has done a lot on moto. And my respect goes out to the moto guys, because not only do they navigate, but they also race the race at a fast pace. And that, for me, is a tremendous accomplishment and really respectful. So when Hunter, decided to get serious about this, obviously reached out to Andrew to see A, if he was interested in coming back to Dakar, and B, if he wanted to do it with Hunter, right? And I think it was not even a question. It was like, yeah, I want to go back. And you mentioned that he had done it before. So when Andrew came back to Dakar, he was actually racing with South Racing as well, with Molly Taylor from Australia 2 years ago. And, Andrew is a great navigator, and I think those guys pair really well together in the vehicle. Andrew is super calm, composed, analytical, sharp guy, and Hunter's, fast driver, really well skilled. And I think that when he gets the communication from Andrew, something just clicks there. And that's what you want with a navigator/driver relationship, and but they're really good together.
So on top of that, you also have another American on board for the team, and that is Sarah Price. And also Sean Behrman, her co-driver, who was co-driver for Case Curry back in the day when he won and was the first American in a UTV, or one of the first Americans at all to win Dakar. So where was the turning point? When did Can-Am decide, okay, we need to bring Sarah onto the factory team?
So Sarah has been part of the Can-Am family for, I would say, the little over 2 years now, right? So from a ambassador in the U.S. and being involved in launch events and marketing activations and all that, I think her dream and desire was always to participate at Dakar. She's obviously competed in many races in the U.S., is a household name when it comes to racing, and a household name when it comes to females in racing as well. I think she pioneered the way to get females motivated to start racing, and I think that Sarah kind of takes it hard to keep that motivation in line. When the team was getting put together, obviously, it's a little bit of of, let's look at the playing field. Let's understand who's out there, who's credible enough to keep racing, because being a top racer is one thing, but you also have to be a certain type of media package as well, right? So I often say that Suck Fate racing is 50% of the effort, and the other 50 is how you basically portray yourself in the media, how you speak to media, how you give interviews, and all that. So if you're marketable, quote unquote, I think you have a lot more chances of being pulled into a factory effort. Not only Can-Am, but I mean, Polaris is doing the same thing, and you look at Ford and you look at Toyota, they're doing the same thing, So yeah. And when it comes to Sean Behrman, I was actually with him and Casey in Saudi when they won the first time, and like you said, they were part of the first American squad to win Dakar. So if you want to race this race, you definitely need some practice in the seat, and you definitely need some time with your team to work out some kinks and technology and all that. So I would definitely suggest anybody looking forward to it or looking into it, that's what you need to do, is to get into rally racing in the W2RC kind of circuit.
Yeah, so people like me, the average privateer, you guys work with South Racing, and South Racing is kind of an aggregate for taking people who are more localized. They're not maybe the factory guys, but they are still talented racers in their own locations. What can you do to get with the South Racing team?
So South Racing is a rally logistics provider, right? So what South does is that from a privateer standpoint, they help people reach their goals to want to conquer Dakar as a challenge, right? So not only do we facilitate all the logistics for the Can-Am factory team, but there's also paying customers that come here with the appetite to just challenge themselves, right? Like, why do people run marathons? They don't necessarily run a marathon to win it, but it's a challenge for them, right? And it's the same thing for motorsports. So South Racing basically handles the logistics, the transportation, the accommodations, the catering, anything that can happen out there in terms of issues or whatever. They have a crew of mechanics here that work overnight to rebuild your car if something happens. So basically giving you the best chance possible to participate in these events. And it's accessible, obviously it doesn't come necessarily at a cheap price tag, but it's a lot more accessible than like a truck program or a different type of a factory program. So definitely, if you want to look into it, you need a logistics provider, and South Racing is the one with the best track record out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I think about that sort of the racing program as a whole. People don't realize that, yes, it's way beyond just going out there, having a car, maintaining yourself on the race course. Like, if you can remove the aspect of logistics, I mean, it takes away 3/4 of the stress that you'll put on yourself for all of the prep, and then even while you're here. So I'm always been a supporter of like the fly and ride, quote unquote, option for people. And so speaking of which, South Racing has been here for doing Dakar and all those things for a long time. Can these people, can privateers come to other W2RC races with South Racing and elsewhere?
So South Racing's catalog of events doesn't necessarily stop at W2RC. There's the Baja Cups in Europe. This year, we're going to South Africa. We've been involved in the racing in the U.S. before, races like Vegas to Reno, where we won with Seth Quintero. So there's definitely a logistical aspect to it, but it's worldwide. We can accommodate pretty much any event in the world. It depends on who wants to go, right? And what the client wants, ultimately. So if you want to participate in a race, let's say in Spain or Portugal or somewhere in Europe, we could definitely facilitate that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And then why is it that South Racing has been choosing Can-Am as a platform for so many years? Is it is it on a business end, or is it because they truly love that platform?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think, Can-Am has always supported South Racing to be their logistics provider with international racing. And, when you speak with people at BRP, South Racing and Can-Am have been working together for a long time now. Since the inception of the X3, South Racing took a leap of faith of getting out of the truck program and going into the side-by-side program before it was even a category at the car. So Scott has been involved in a lot of discussions with not only management, but also engineering, the racing department, which, it turns into now some of that team is actually here and involved with the whole race itself. So, if you asked us why we chose a platform, because, it's always been the best bet out there in terms of pulling off a win in rally racing. It's the most competitive platform. It's the most reliable out there. And, it's somewhat the platform of choice when it comes to rally racing worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now that we have a brand new model that's coming to Dakar, coming to Rally, what was the process like to get the Mav R essentially homologated and ready for FIA?
Okay, so any vehicle from a factory, whether it be a new vehicle, an older vehicle that you want to make race ready, you need to go through an homologation process with the FIA. So, the FIA kind of sanctions the race and makes sure that competitors are safe, and they have the rule book, and they kind of dictate what vehicles should look like and perform like in order to keep everybody safe. I think the first rule is to keep everybody safe. And then from there, we go into category restrictions and all that. Having the Maverick R come to life within a short span of time, it's only been on the market for a little over 2 years, or I would say about 2 years now. It's a full year process when it comes to submitting designs, submitting an actual vehicle, developing a race chassis for it, submitting it to crash tests, submitting it for technical inspections and all that stuff. So there's a lot that goes into it. And thankfully, we work closely with the guys at Can-Am Racing to make it happen basically with the FIA. So it took over 8 months to get it homologated.
And so everything that's here ready to race, are those things that we can get, parts that we can get on the consumer vehicle, or are there any special changes?
So from the showroom floor, the Maverick R comes plenty capable enough to participate in pretty much any desert race, with the addition of certain safety features and performance features that you would like. Now, take that into consideration. The vehicles that are racing here are slightly modified to meet, obviously, the FIA rules, but also the rally rules, right? So typically the engine package here will run what is restrictor, depending on what type of category you're in, whether it's prototype T3s or side-by-side T4s, right? So there's a lot more that goes into it. I would say 80% of the car is consumer-facing parts that you could purchase either from an aftermarket person or aftermarket company, or straight from the vehicle stock itself.
That's awesome. Okay. And so then you get through Dakar. Do you think that you guys are going to be continuing with the W2RC this year, or what's your plan?
So we've had, obviously, So when it comes to W2RC, that's up to the pilot's choice, right? So if they want to compete year-round to be part of the W2RC World Cup, they can definitely do that, and South Racing can facilitate that. We already have some racers, for example, Sarah Price and Fernando Alvarez, that have signed up to compete. Fernando just came off a win last year. He won the category, so being a world champion is definitely something that people, aspire to. But, it all starts at Dakar. You have to participate and finish the race to be able to score points for the W2RC. So, it's definitely a difficult challenge, but it's definitely something that that's kind of like the next step after.
Right. I mean, it's interesting when you take a step back and think about all the different parts that go into just doing Dakar. Then if you want to expand and do all the WRC, 2RC races, I mean, not only is the performance and the logistical aspect, but there's also a marketing aspect to it, which is essentially, I'd say, communications, marketing, media. That's your wheelhouse.
Correct.
What does someone in your position have to do? What's the procedure for you to create a strategy for an effort like this at Dakar?
Correct. So there's a lot of effort that goes into communications, from a daily update to all the partners and people involved, stakeholders, to basically being the media liaison on site. There's a lot of press that come in and want to talk to our pilots. Being a factory effort, it gets a lot more visibility. And we have people like you who want to get the scoops, right? They want to know what it's all about, and they want to understand, what the platform is about or how the operation works. And my job is to either answer those questions or find the person who does, So not only am I the liaison between brands, sponsors, and partners, I also act kind of as a facilitator for people who are on site and want basically to get interviews and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a fun job. I get to be here, be part of the story, have fun with the racers and co-pilots, and there's definitely a lot of stories that come out of this place, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, it's super creative. It seems like it's always challenging. It's always fresh and new, and it's very interesting to see. From my side of it, and also kind of touching on being on your side, I respect it a lot. It's not an easy job, and I wonder too, like, can you explain? People don't realize that you're also sort of a filter, and it's like, okay, what happens when you're putting out a fire? What happens when something goes wrong on course? How do you, as an expert, know when to say something, know when not to say something, and know how to word it?
Correct. And I would say that the way that you could correctly respond to something that is happening on course or after a stage or something like that, with experience, it's about assessing the situation, understanding what happened, understanding, what faulted, or what went wrong. And then being able to communicate it in a way that, that people would not necessarily, how can I say this?
Doesn't seem like a disaster.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like, you filter it out, but at the end of the day, you can't hide the fact that, like, let's say somebody has a mechanical issue, the press will probably get to it before you do. The only thing you could do is communicate the truthful side of it to your partners and sponsors and tell them, like, here's what happened, but here's what we're going to do about it,
Yeah.
And I think that every problem should have a solution or should have a game plan moving forward, And we've ran into some issues here at this Dakar. We're early in the stages where we had to make a plan and understand what was happening with the vehicles, understand what we've learned from them, and then package that into a solution-driven approach, right? So what are we going to do if this happens, or what are we going to do if that happens? And that's what the communication manager needs to do on a team, is to make sure that all the stakeholders understand what the game plan is moving forward, So I'm always living in the moment, but always thinking about the future.
Absolutely. It makes me think that, on a personal level, do you play any games or any sort of like chess, poker, things like that? Because
I don't have time.
like, people with that mindset, I find, it's strategy all day,
Yeah.
and for those who don't realize what goes on, not just on the media side, but the guy who's between the media and the team, you're really bridging all the gaps and putting out the fires.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, we'll never put false information out there. I think, if you're putting out a fire, the best thing to do is to just communicate that, you're assessing the situation and that you'll get back to people. It's not necessarily, nobody is out there to get the top headline when something bad happens, other than if it's caught on TV and then it's blown up on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you deal with something that's been sensationalized?
A lot of teams here, when that does happen, they turn it to their advantage, right? You look at Carlos Sainz, rolling over in the dunes. I can't tell you how much visibility that got for Ford and Red Bull. It's you could turn your bad karma into a positive media output, visibility-wise, when it comes to stuff like that. I think it's one of the videos that got them, over 1 million views yesterday, just because A, it's Carlos Sainz, and B, he's got big, partners like Ford and Red Bull. So obviously, if something is sensationalized like that, just turn it into a positive and surf it, and then talk about what you guys did to put him back in the race and everything. That's where the top communicators come in flesh.
Interesting. And it's what people don't really realize a lot of the times, and this is especially for those aspirational racers out there watching this, is that the racers themselves are also a piece of that communications puzzle. And, what do you see out of the racers who really have it figured out on the media side? What are they doing to A, get the attention of factory teams that are looking to fill some spots, and B, just bring on some attention to their own personal race efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. From let's say, a privateer standpoint, if you wanted to participate in rally racing and kind of build a name for yourself with an aspiration to join a Can-Am factory or just a factory effort, I think you need to be a well-rounded package. So not only do you have a media following, whether that be on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or whatever social media that you're using. But you also need to be well-spoken on top of being a really good driver, Then we love to work with people not only that are pros at that, but also, that can turn it on when it needs to turn on. Even if you had a bad day, you need to come out of the car, find some positive light out of it, and, talk about what you're going to do to make it better, And so that's basically what it boils down to is your communication skills. And it makes my job easier as well. If I don't have to necessarily coach the people that I work with into saying the proper things or coaching them into the situation, that just makes my life easier. We ran into some issues here where, now drivers come to me and they're like, hey, how should we announce this? What's the pacing of the announcement? What should we do? Can I post this? Can I say that? And not only are they most of the time right and their instincts are right, but, sometimes I just hey, maybe just, your posting order, switch it up a little bit. Let's talk about this first. This is what happened and this is what we're doing to assess the situation. And this is what we're going to do to make it better. So I think it's a sequence of events that you need to kind of focus on.
And so do you have any, off the top of your head, any races you think of who are on point when it comes to their presence?
Obviously we have a lot of them on our team, Sarah Price is probably the best example, on the Can-Am factory team. She's super engaged. She's always there. She's always there for her fans. She's doing stuff like, fundraisers to get their fans' names on the car and all these social gimmicks that make her so likable, that, it comes to life at the race. She plays it up. And Chaleco Lopez, on the other hand, he's like a legend superstar down in South America. He's got his own museum. It's wild, So he's sensationalized in a different way because people just admire his racing and his ability, or not his ability, but his legacy. Yeah. So, I think if you're a well-rounded package, you could be a media sensation and have, understand what strategy looks like on social media and not necessarily just posting videos of yourself or anything like that. You have some sort of gimmicks in mind and stuff that drives engagement and reach. And then there's guys like Chaleco Lopez who have a massive following based off their performance in the past, and people basically just admire what he does and they want to know what's next and they love the behind the scenes stuff, So it depends what type of category or social influencer that you fall into, but you need to play it up to your audience.
Yes. And those are actually two very excellent examples because you think it's almost like the old guard and the new guard, Sarah is definitely someone who embraces the modern avenues for promotion of herself and what her generation and younger are really captivated by. And Chaleco is definitely, he's the guy who people just see as a legend. They've known about him almost like he's been a rumor for many years, and that's what builds his legend. So it's very interesting.
And we've seen that that fellowship grow with other competitors as well. I've had the opportunity to work with Rokas Bachuska, who's a Lithuanian driver, and Rokas is always a firecracker. He's all over the place. He's on Instagram, on his Facebook, on his LinkedIn account. Every day there's a team behind him posting stuff, and Rokas has fans out here in the desert. People fly over from Lithuania. They're waving flags out there. And,
All right. So that is a wrap on the conversation. It did get cut a little bit short, and that was just due to technical difficulties with the cameras. Of course, you didn't hear it on camera, but Kira from West by 1000 did mention, and Justin, who's the photographer with them, the Dakar is absolute havoc on equipment. It is one of the most taxing things that you can do with these things in the sand, in the heat, in the varying temperatures, in the cold. It's just all over the place. So still, it was a great interview. It was great listening to Phil Henderson talk a little bit about, these different dynamics that are involved in the Dakar Rally. And then also, even going into the W2RC side of things, and the championship side. So it is awesome to see how that program has come along. It's awesome to see how the vehicle has been developed. And, connecting the dots isn't that far apart. You're talking about a vehicle that you could basically take off the showroom floor, do the safety requirements for the organization, and then you could go race the thing. Pretty good. In a world of very expensive hobbies, it's nice to see something that is going to be a little bit closer to the prize, a little bit closer to being set up and ready to go. Obviously, as things progress, the faster you get, the more components that you're going to be looking for, the better handling, the this, the that, the other. I mean, anything from a motorcycle to a car to a UTV is going to be or can be, as we affectionately call them, a money pit and an investment. So for those of you that are looking, here's a little communications tip for your significant other. If they're having problems with you spending a certain dollar amount, just remember, it's all in the name of safety. It's hard to argue safety. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Stay tuned. We've got a few more interviews coming. We're working our way through them. It's been a little bit slow going. We had some wildfires here in Southern California. One of them a little closer than we'd like, but as it goes, living out in the countryside. So with that being said, guys, remember, it'll make sense when you get there. Enjoy the ride.